Hi everyone and welcome to Harvesting Innovation, a podcast by Biotope. Biotope is a biotech incubator program and pre-seed investor backed by VIB, one of the world's premier life science institutes located in Belgium. Our mission at Biotope is to help startups like yours to take root. Twice a year, we organize a base camp for biotech startup founders, and we offer year-round support to a selected few. A program with one major goal in mind: to get your startup ready for seed funding in 12 months. In our podcast series, we want to dive deeper into some of the specific challenges faced by biotech startups in agri-food, and we do so with founders, with experts, and with investors. We hope that these conversations will also inspire you. I'm Annick, head of Biotope, and today we will talk about startup corporate collaboration. And we do so with Ilana Taub, co-founder and CEO of Boulder Food, one of our portfolio companies, and David Dessers, managing partner of Cresco Law. Welcome both.
Thank you.
So for startups, showing commercial traction is key. For the next phase in their company, they need to work with corporates one moment in time and also seed investor hammer on this commercial traction. So LOIs are nice, and LOIs means letters of intent, but they're rarely more than a written, yes, we're open for more once you have it. So startups having something tangible, like Boulder Foods, should aim for more. But since corporates and startups rarely speak the same language and definitely do not have the same speed, it stays very difficult to find this ideal startup collaborate framework. Theory is definitely not always the same as practice, as I think we will also see today. So let's listen to both stories. Ilana, you have a prototype of your product, and you can tell more about it in a minute. And David, you wrote this wonderful book on practices for corporate partnering. So it would be nice to see where you agree on theory and practice and where not. David, would you like to introduce yourself?
So I'm David, I'm a lawyer. I'm the founding partner of Cresco. We are a Belgian law firm, about 25 lawyers, created almost 10 years ago. And our mission was to support entrepreneurs, investors, and corporates in structuring innovation relationships, primarily focused on B2B collaborations. Belgium is a real B2B landscape for startups. I think 70% of the startups are focused on B2B. And yeah, it has been a very nice journey until now. Together with the growth in startups and venture funding, I mean, 10 years ago was much less funding around, and now you have, well, there's still gaps, of course, but from pre-seed to very large rounds, was a lot of availability of cash, and yeah, we have a specific angle in corporate venturing, corporate partnering. That is what fascinates us most, basically. So.
Super. Thank you and welcome. Ilana, a little bit more about you.
So I'm one of the two co-founders and the CEO of Boulder Foods. We make ingredients to create the next wave of cheese alternatives using biomass fermentation. It's specifically a biomass fermentation of mycelium and vegetable substrates. And indeed, we have a prototype or MVP that we are testing with corporates at the moment.
Super. Thank you. Looking forward to discussion. So when it comes to the theory versus the practice, David, what are, according to you, the main three challenges that startups face with your expertise when trying to build this corporate relationship?
Well, I think, I mean, we try to approach it differently. I mean, when we talk about startup corporate collaboration, we always tell the entrepreneurs to keep three objectives in mind and judge the entire negotiation and relationship on that basis. And one is, I mean, after I enter into the collaboration, what is my freedom to operate? And your freedom to operate, that can be restricted in various manners. I mean, the most obvious one is the corporate says, okay, I'm willing to collaborate with you, but I want exclusive collaboration. So by definition, exclusivity limits your freedom to operate. Secondly, having IP arrangements in place where you get into co-ownership, or the corporate saying, I have funded this, therefore I own it. I mean, you cannot reuse that intellectual property, or it is burdened, and that is a problem, going forward. So that is a super important factor to look at. I mean, how free am I? And if I'm not so free anymore, how can I regain my freedom if the relationship does not work? Second, what is my freedom to raise cash going forward? And having a limited freedom to operate has a dramatic influence on your ability to raise funding. And third, how do I ensure that in the long run I am able to sell my company at the optimal valuation? That is really relevant if the corporate also makes an investment in the business, although you also see corporates that just have a strategic collaboration and then just put some right of first refusal to buy your company if you would ever want to sell it somewhere deep down in the agreement. So and the entire relationship, we keep those objectives in mind when looking at the relationship. So I mean, for me, freedom to operate is the most important one. The second one, where I see a lot of, and that's not a legal issue, that is, I mean, what is the senior executive support at the corporate level for this relationship? Because corporates, they have many more means, and most importantly, they can really change strategy quite rapidly. And you can talk to someone in a corporate. Is that the right person to talk to? I mean, does he or she have the appropriate authority to make certain decisions? In the times that we've worked with people, I'm talking with XYZ. And then 1 year later, well, XYZ is not there anymore, or XYZ has no power to take any decisions. And you've lost time. And that's something startups don't have. I mean, you have limited funding, you have limited time, and every bet you make excludes other bets. And if you make the wrong bet on the wrong partner, it can kill you. So that take into account that there is the possibility of a change of strategy and the relationship not working out. And then the third point is think through your how do I get out of this relationship? I mean, that type of worst case planning is very important. We spend most time on those aspects. I mean, it maybe sound a bit negative, but from experience, I mean, we see what works and what doesn't work. And if you just do a handshake and have an exclusive relationship that does not have appropriate metrics, does not have targets, just, you be happy that I'm happy to collaborate with you and sign this 5-year exclusivity agreement without any balanced obligations on the side of the corporate. That is something to really be avoided. And if it works out, well, great, but you need to take into account there the worst case scenarios.
Yeah. So Ilana, that's a whole manual.
I know. What was the question?
So you now have this amazing prototype, and I would encourage everybody to, if you have the chance to really taste it. I'm definitely a fan. So you have a prototype. You go to corporates, reach out to them. How do you turn all this theory then into practice? What are the steps that you take along when you do this? Does it sound familiar? And do you tick all the boxes?
I mean, we do a lot of preparation, first of all, on all the corporates that we meet or even approach. So that means obviously like a deep dive into what the company does. But, you were talking about finding the right people. So, I mean, we actually map out. So really go deep and try and map out like who's in the company, what do they do, what's their role, what's their decision power. And then I think it's not even just about finding one person, right? I mean, from these corporates, they make decisions. It's not one person ultimately who's going to make a decision. So we need to find buy-in from many different people. But you still also need the right entry point. So I think for us, it's just trying to find the right people as opposed to person. And then also asking in our network, so we have advisors like you, Biotope, but we have others as well, where actually many people that we know have interacted with these companies, or you know a bit the culture of the company, or you might know X, Y, and Z. So it's also getting, I guess, breaking the wall or the facade of this big company that you don't know a bit to understand how they function, and because they all have different dynamics. And then obviously, I mean, we have legal frame. I mean, we sign NDAs, we sign MTAs. We have Martina, who's the lawyer from Biotope, from VIB, who helps us, when we need to. It's not systematic because there's some of these which are pretty standardized, and after you've read 20, you kind of start to understand what they're saying. But we still get help also from professionals on putting the right paperwork around each step as you go forward.
And is that learning by doing, or do you say, okay, we do 2-3 corporates and then we know the drill a bit and it's easier with the 4th or 5th? Or do you need to start every time all over again because it's a different party with different contracts, different aims? Some probably take this FTO into account and other ones not.
I think, you learn from... they all have differences, but ultimately, they're still like big corporate machines that all have very similar standard practices, I would say. So, they have differences, but you still learn from every interaction, and every time we go through the process, I would say we get better at it.
Yeah. Okay, I understand.
Yeah, maybe to jump. On what you said is you said you do your due diligence, and I think that is. Super important. We stress that, and companies have reputations, big companies, and some really have a predatory approach to partnerships. They look at you and say, great idea. If you don't have patents, for example, and we just squeeze you, and then we do it ourselves, type of. So, and to do that check and see with whom they collaborate and what their experience is, that is something you should really do. A second point, how we make that explicit in the relationship. What we, if we're consulted, we often hear is like, we're talking already for such a long time with each other, and it does not become concrete. So months on end that just talks back and forth. And our approach is, and you said it in the beginning, Annick, letter of intent. We use letters of intent or term sheets for any type of relationship. So it's very known if you do a VC round or you do an M&A deal, the typical term sheet and the terms. But that is a tool, and that's also what we explain in our book, that we use for any type of collaboration. And we call it that you put your stick in the ground. And that, okay, we're talking now already for such a long time. And you then say, okay, well, I frame the relationship. What is the scope of collaboration? Who will do what? What happens if things go sour? And make that very explicit. And then you put that on the table and you force the other side to express itself on. And that is a very good way to assess whether it makes sense to continue discussions. Because if you then get, for example, for points like, yeah, but you cannot work with anyone else, you cannot raise funding anywhere, and you have to sell the company to me, well, then you know upfront, and you know before you waste all that time whether it makes sense to keep talking with that party. And the good companies, they engage. I think the worst thing to do, and sometimes startup entrepreneurs do that because they don't want to rock the boat. They're afraid, like, oh, my launch customer, oh, my MVP, and I will not act too difficult. That's really the wrong approach to take, because then they will really take advantage of you. And to really show, we've thought this through, this is how we see the relationship, and you explain why you see it like that. It's viewed positive by most sensible people, and they look at you and they say, oh, well, she has thought about it, and let's get into the discussion. And for the few cases where the reaction is, oh no, but I mean, this is absolutely not what I want, or you get very strong pushback, that's also a way of doing diligence on your counterpart.
So I hear you say, David, as a startup, stay in the driver's seat and make it as concrete as possible from the beginning?
Yeah, and also if you talk with different corporates, I mean, the same with funding round, I mean, for any type of deal, don't wait for the other side to put something on the table. Do it yourself. It is viewed as a positive thing by the other side. Especially, I mean, we also, over the years, we now work more and more for corporates that we meet in transactions and say, oh, well, they seem to know how to put these things together, and they consult us, is that they appreciate it, because I see sometimes how long, when we work for them, how long it takes, for a proposal to move through the organization, and before the point it gets submitted to the other side. So taking the initiative yourself is certainly something that should be viewed as positive.
Yeah, because for me that also aligns with corporate willingness, right? I don't know how it is with you, Ilana, but you have a product that can fit in a very specific market. How easy it is to, indeed, you find a person who's interested, but how easy it is to also feel the willingness of the corporate to really do something with the product, or they're just sniffing around in your product and one of competitors, or is that easy to find that out?
I mean, one judge of willingness, I guess, is the speed at which they respond to you, right? So, like, do you feel like you're pushing a rock uphill, or actually, you send an email and then you get a reply pretty quickly, or not? I would, like, if you have to constantly be like, hey, did you get my email? Like, probably they're not super enthusiastic. But then trying to judge the willingness, like, are they just trying to spy on what you're doing versus, I don't think I have a very, like, I don't have a very good answer for that. What I specifically last week, Mike and Ophelia, who work with me, they went to meet a huge corporate, and we made we had a 1 hour meeting to prepare the 1 hour meeting, and we did some role playing of this, like how it would be with corporates, and then the advice I gave to both of them on this exactly, like, are these going to be vultures, or are they going to be actually willing? It was listen to your gut, because I think ultimately, I mean, you can really trust your, if you have a weird feeling about someone, probably there is something actually weird. So it's not very good advice apart from listen to your gut feeling, but I think it's valid as well, right? Yeah. I mean, they're corporates, but they're human. So you can read their body language. You can still interpret all of that, like with any human being.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. But paperwork limits then the risk?
Yes, yeah. I mean, I don't want to be cynical, but especially with this change in staffing at the corporate, and I mean, just clear agreements are just, necessary and important, and the times I've heard, like, yes, but you should not interpret this like that, and we will never enforce it, or what have you, had type of, especially when it comes to, these main items like freedom to operate restrictions, buyouts, etc., is that the person you are talking to when putting together the relationship, there's absolutely zero guarantee that at the point of time it becomes relevant, that person will still be there or have that role. And the new person appointed does not have the context. And then if you then bring up the point of, but, at that point in time, it was said that we should be, well, is that written on paper? No. And that is, unfortunately, something that you have to take into account. And
I think a very simple thing that we do after every meeting is we do send an email summarizing, everything that was discussed, what the next steps are, and what was agreed. Yeah. So at least, it's not a formal document, but at least there is an email trace that you can go back to. And it's, we do that systematically.
Yeah, but also the working with the term sheets, it is the advantage is that it's an iterative approach, and you send it comes back, and the advantage is it makes people really think about the relationship. And what you should never do is rely on a lawyer that says, well, this is something that, for example, a joint development arrangement coupled with some commercialization. The person says, well, you will need ABC in terms of long form documentation, and that they tell you, okay, I will draft those and we'll send that across to the other side. That is missing half of the process. It will cost you a lot of money, and a contract will be drafted that is completely maybe wasted or not appropriate for the circumstances. And having this dating period before you marry, and really take the time to discuss in detail based on bullets that become longer bullets and more detailed, really helps you to establish understanding and the relationship between the parties. And then once you do a handshake on that, okay, then you move to the next.
So at which
phase.
point in this relationship do you see the term sheet between?
Well, of course, not from day one.
That's why I'm asking at which stage.
Yeah. I would say at the point, if you're talking about, for example, a joint development relationship, and there's high level ideas floating around, and you feel that this is not going anywhere fast enough, then and what's in a name? A term sheet, just a detailed overview per topic of how you view the relationship, what is common, what is diverging, what will you do, what will I do, and if we don't live up to our obligations or expectations, these should be the consequences. It is not more complicated than that. And whether it's a term sheet or a letter of intent, I frankly don't really care. The point is,
from a startup point of view, I can see all of that going well until the consequences, where a corporate would be like,
whatever.
Yeah, exactly. From my experience, they would just
but there the whole point is that you need to, and some things I think you can be flexible on. Other things that have to be really, you have to be super strict in your negotiation. So the times I've heard a corporate say, and that's really in the CVC context, I want to strategically collaborate with this company, and I'm making an investment in that company. And the nuance is that the financial relationship follows the strategic relationship, and they are tied together, but they're still separate. And if a corporate, and that is what I said, I've heard so many times, I've made an investment in your company, and therefore I'm entitled to a veto right, keeping ABC out, just by virtue of having made the investment. And every time again we explain yes, but no. That is not correct. You cannot. There's a strategic collaboration, and there has to be, crudely said, meat on the bone in that relationship. And if you cannot agree to revenue commitments from day one, normal, because you don't know, they also don't know how successful the relationship will be and whether they will be able to sell your product or produce it properly. Okay, you cannot get revenue commitments. Okay, we agree that we will exclusively work with you for 1 year, and then we will jointly determine targets. And if those targets are not met, in year 2, 3, or whatever it may be, then any limitation on working with competitors, both from an equity perspective or a collaboration perspective, they go away, versus giving someone, just by virtue of an equity relationship, rights that you would give to a VC. And that's also something we always have to explain to the corporates. It's like, yes, you treat us differently from a financial investor, and we're also investing our money. Says, yes, but you are different.
Yeah, of course.
You are different. You have a different objectives, and this cash you're injecting, that is not what it's about. What it's about for you often is buying optionality, and that is what we're concerned about in the relationship.
Yeah. So Ilana, what is your ideal outcome of such a collaboration, and at what moment in time so far have you then managed to really describe it as such to the corporate? Are you already in a stage that you can say, ideally for us, you would be my exit scenario, or you would buy my. Can you?
No, we haven't talked about an exit scenario with the corporates that we're talking with at the moment. I think we're still very much in the mindset of commercializing our product. So for us, our time horizon, obviously we've thought about an exit as a company, but right now, like day to day, what's in our mind is how do we get to commercialization?
Yeah.
So that's the mindset that we're in when we have these meetings, or when we're planning or discussing all these collaborations with corporates is how do we work together to commercialize this and really prove the market for our product?
Yeah. But do you quantify it already? Like David says, okay, you have some numbers and things in a term sheet, or is it still?
Not with them. I mean, yes, we've talked about it in meetings, but on paper, not yet, because we're still doing our, the corporates that they want to do the first trials, maybe even a second trial before you get into...
And preferably a third and a fourth, for sure.
Before you get into further collaboration discussions. So we haven't gotten there yet.
Because how do you limit that, David? I always have the feeling in this corporate startup collaboration, even as a startup, if you say, okay, here it stops, you're the one losing. It's very few times that the corporate says, okay, I have a huge loss. They just move on and try something else. Is there a way to avoid that, to make sure that you indeed have this relationship that everybody, you have winning on both sides, but you also have losing on both sides, that you can convince parties of that?
I mean, at least you have to try. And is it always possible? Maybe it's related to this topic. But unless you are a founder or a founder team which is wealthy prior to setting up your startup and or you're a repeat entrepreneur, for example, okay, I've built a company, sold it, and then I fund it myself and I have sufficient reserves to keep going for quite a while. If that is not the case, it is very, very difficult to have a balanced negotiation with your counterpart, whether that's a corporate or it can also be another startup, for example. We always, try to the extent that it's in our position to do so, is that having a financial backer on the side and first raise funding with a VC, specialized VC, would not even say angel investor. Really someone who knows your sector helps enormously when negotiating with a corporate, because I know. Maybe it's a bit different in biotech because it's so common to have these corporate partnering relationships with life science companies. Is that you that they're by nature dubious about the corporate, and they will think about the same things: freedom to operate, freedom to raise cash, and how do I realize my best exit possible? And any component of that relationship with the corporate that does not fit, they will help you block it. If you're on your own with your founder team and you don't have the means and say, I don't have cash, I have my ID, I have my MVP, and I want you corporate to make me bigger and serve as a testing platform, etc. There's at a certain point in time, the corporate is going to say, but why should I do all this?
What's in it for me?
What's in it for me? Why should I fund you? Why should I do ABC? And then you can argue, but it's the team, it's the idea, it's the know-how, and that represents a certain value. And if then on the other side it says, okay, but human resources, cash that we have to invest, if that is too imbalanced, then you're just in a weak position in the negotiation. And to have that funding, it doesn't have to be huge fund, but to have a cash buffer and say, okay, well, we will fund part of this development ourselves. it just makes it much easier to negotiate with the corporate. And if they would want to make an investment in your company, it will certainly be at a much higher pre-money valuation than if you say, well, here's the idea and just fund me. The only exception is really repeat entrepreneurs that can really go to the market and say, I've done this 3 times. I've made some people a lot of money, and this is my new idea, and that's my pre-money valuation. And people invest based on trust on what you have accomplished in the past. But that is for me really the only exception, and also bootstrapping as long as possible. To the more you build yourself, the better position you are in when talking with VCs and corporates. My experience. But I also admit, in biotech, in agritech, the sums needed in order to get to a certain point, it's just different from other startups where take AI for example, or other.
It's a different thing where you can prove
it's just different. You need much less means to develop what you want to develop versus you. Huh?
Yeah, my experience is very different. Where you're talking about, having a VC on board, and then you can leverage a bit of them to negotiate with corporates. So right now we're both engaging with corporates and fundraising, and have approached plenty of VCs in the last 3 months or however long. And all of them just want to see more commercial traction and will not come on board until we have a corporate on board. So
yeah, but but that is a chicken and egg problem.
Yeah,
for sure it is like they want to see commercial traction, but the question is, how far does the commercial traction have to go? Very often, a memorandum of understanding with a corporate saying, I'm willing to collaborate with Boulder Foods, assuming ABC has been fulfilled, for example, in the future. They have to know that you're talking to corporates, and the corporates are willing to work with you. But I don't think it is always necessary for the commercial relationship to already be in place prior to receiving the investment. But it's a delicate. That's one of the hardest things for a founder to do, to balance those two factors. Yeah.
Yes, we're right in the middle of it.
Yeah, indeed. It's like a dance, right? You have an investor who says, yes, 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 if the corporate says yes, and the corporate says, yes, 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 but you need to have this financial agreement.
Exactly.
So you're really in the middle. What is like the biggest... Is there one thing, Ilana, that you can point your finger on, like, if this challenge would be tackled for me, I would be able to make a next step? We have an expert here.
You mean if with
in
a
in the process with your corporate? This is what we bump into all the time.
I think it always comes down to money. Really, like, if we had more money, we could do more of our own analytical work and testing on our ingredients, which, some of it it's very useful. We're learning with the trials and the corporates that we're doing. But if we had infinite money, we could do all of that and then come to the corporates much more prepared. They have very fancy equipment. They have very large R&D teams. And if we came with like a level playing field, like, oh, look, I have all the same equipment. I have the same R&D team. And maybe it's not really answering your question. It's a magic bullet.
Well, it is to a certain extent. The question is, can there be a solution to that? Because the infinite money is an amazing dream, and being at the same level playing field as well. So is there a way to use some practices to get there, or to show that you're on the same level, which is always a difficult thing, I think.
Yeah, it's not easy. No, there's not an easy answer to the question. Sometimes we call it funded development. That this whole idea. I don't have money myself, and I need someone to do ABC for me to fund R&D, etc. For example, or develop a certain module. It's not relevant, I think, but I have a product suite I want to develop, and I have done A and B and C. I will do that conjointly in collaboration with a corporate, and I expect them to fund it for me. To which 99% of the times the reply will be, okay, yeah, but I've paid for this, so therefore I own it, the outcome of the process. And there you I think you can use different techniques to try to maybe coming back to the point, Freedom, it's crucial that you keep that IP. So because if you go through that collaboration and it is transferred, I mean, once it's gone, and unless you can reverse engineer it to do the same thing for someone else in a different manner, which takes time and money, of course, so that is not advisable. But for example, working for them at cost, I mean, significantly reduced rates, and see, I mean, how much do I need, to keep my bare expenses covered, and basically work below what would the normal market prices be, giving a temporary exclusivity, for example. Say, okay, look, you do this for me, let me keep the ownership, but I promise that for the next year you're the only one, for example, that can commercialize the product. Sometimes what we've also done is work with equity-based mechanisms, for example, where you say, okay, we don't have money, you have paid for the development, you let me own the IP, but I give you a warrant or a mechanism that creates upside in the future. And let's say, for example, a couple % of your cap table, that like a subscription right, that it only kicks in or becomes relevant once you have resold the product they have funded to other parties, or royalty type of arrangements. I think you try to look at it creatively. I mean, some things are very binary. So you say, no, this I really cannot do, but between 0 and 1, there's a lot of options, and that is what you should try to do, is to look at, okay, this is the position, how can I influence this and get long term what I want by giving up something in the short term.
Yeah. Does it resonate, Silana?
Yeah, no, it does. And I was listening, and I was like, yes, we're doing that, we're doing that, we're doing that. So it's good.
Yeah. No, it's really good.
Will it actually lead to the outcome that we want? We'll see. But yeah, I was when you were talking, I was like taking them off in my mind. So I think we're doing okay.
That's good. That's great.
Long-term perspective in mind for the short-term discussions that you have. Maybe to summarize it and to make it a little bit more concrete, we now talked a lot about startup perspective.
Yeah.
We also have corporates listening in. I hope so. So, David, what are like the 3 biggest mistakes that you see corporates make in this collaboration with startups? And shortly, what are the biggest mistakes, but also how could they tackle these as easy as possible?
I think it is. I think very often they should strive for the same objective. When we look at collaborations between parties, we always say, whether it's to a startup, an investor, a corporate, is that try to structure a relationship in a balanced manner and not push someone against the wall and abuse your power to get something that makes the relationship imbalanced. And we say that also to corporates. For example, continuously, it's like, okay, you take a certain position. I want them to work exclusively with me. I want ABC. And we say the same thing to them as we say to the startups to whom we work. It's like, listen, if you do that, then this company will become uninvestable. If you prohibit them from working with others in a domain, well, that will stop innovation. So I don't think we say anything different. And the point is that, we see that on our micro level, on the basis of the things that we are involved in, is that an unbalanced relationship does not work, and it becomes apparent very fast that it does not work. It's the same with an investor. If you push an entrepreneur really with his back against the wall and you take predatory terms, I mean, you need that entrepreneur
of course
to build your business, and people don't forget these things. And the day that things don't go well, then you will say, I mean, why should I do this? Why should I? And you can then stand at the side as an investor or a corporate, say, yeah, but you have to. Well, no, I don't have to do anything. I just leave, and then the money's gone, the collaboration is gone. So I think the most successful partnerships that we helped establish are really the ones where people say, I negotiated, I gave in this, I got that, and did I get everything I want out of this negotiation? No. Do I believe that this ultimately is fair and balanced, and can I defend this? Yes. And I know that is not really an answer to your question, but in corporates, I think meet people with goodwill. I mean, I don't think there's bad will involved. They're humans, like you said, but they have certain limitations they have to deal with that you don't have to deal with. They have a hierarchy to go through to get things vetted and approved, and it just takes time. But I think the essence is, do not only think about yourself in this relationship. And if you demand, you should not demand the impossible. And certainly if it's a company that is already venture backed, and if you, on those 3 criteria, you ask certain things, it will not pass. And we say that to them. It's like, listen, you go with a point of view that is defendable and that these entrepreneurs can sell internally and get approved. Because if you don't, then you're also losing your time. And we do think that it is possible to do it in such a way that it satisfies the interests of both parties. So.
Yeah. So also challenges on the corporate side.
Oh yeah,
for sure.
yeah, absolutely.
For sure. Ilana, what are for you the 3 takeaways, like in this journey that you said, oh, if I would have known that beforehand, probably would have been a bit more smoother for all the startups still starting this journey of startup collaboration?
I think I said it before already, but just preparation. And you said the word, I didn't use the word due diligence, but you used it actually. And usually people will talk about due diligence on a startup, but I think using the word in that context is super useful. And it is what we've been doing. I just didn't use that term, but due diligence on startups, on corporates. Yeah, exactly. On corporates. I think that is extremely important. And again, I talked about us doing it, but I think it's something that we've learned in this process in the last 9 months, and that's thanks to like one advisor that we have, for instance. It's really about trying to map the decision making in the corporates, so finding the right people, or finding mapping the influence, like how that works. And I don't think I'd really thought about that before going on this specific journey. And then I would say today, my main takeaway will be around, you said, you use the word term sheet, whether it's term sheet or whatever you want to use it, but just put it on the table and be proactive. I think we do a bit of that, but at the same time, like maybe we have to be a bit more, not courageous, but a bit more, just a bit more like
convinced.
Forward just forward with corporate. I think inevitably it's a bit there is an imbalance of power. So we also I don't think we let them walk all over us like at all. Like we argue against some of the terms that they try and put and so on, but still there is always the feeling of we're a bit at their mercy. And I think one takeaway I will take there is really, instead of also waiting to be at their mercy, to actually just be proactive and go out there.
It's appreciated by. I mean, if you are a walkover, you're not respected. Huh?
No, exactly.
So
I mean, that we definitely, just to be clear, we do not do that at all.
You don't look like a walkover at all. So.
But I think just being a bit more, I really like the idea of the term sheet or whatever we want to call it. But I think we will do that. And just
one thing to add to what you said is that you and when you talk about the mapping, the influence mapping, is that things certainly move fast if if your support within the other side is senior enough to push things through. Because what sometimes you also see, and that is often post factum, when things don't work out after you do have factions in corporates.
Yeah.
And you sometimes have people who will do everything in their power not to make it work.
Yeah.
And that is some assessment you have to make. I mean, what I'm proposing now, does that replace someone? Does that replace someone? Does that replace a certain business? And that is a threat to business lines and to people. And if you really convince, ideally, of course, the CEO of a company says, I really, really want this, then it happens, and it happens fast.
Yeah.
Yes, but I mean, this is not from Boulder Foods, so it's I started another company before, and it was a bit different because it was more of a. It's not. I mean, it's still a bit of a partnership, but it's more of a sales relationship where we were selling. I mean, it was with a retailer, and actually we had the buy-in from the CEO, and then we were negotiating with the commercial director, and he was the person who really did not want to make it happen. And it did not matter at all that the CEO had bought into this. I mean, he was like, I have my plan. I have my objectives for the year. I don't like this. I mean, we were, we were selling, but it's not alternative protein, but it was also a bit of a different product. And he was like, I like my standard products. I don't care what the CEO has said. So I think probably most of the time it would, but not necessarily. I mean, if you have one person who just, for whatever reason, does not want to go your way, it can really
And that is,
really have an impact.
Yeah, and also going forward, I mean, the incentives have to be right. The trade, I mean, internally, I mean, I just as an anecdote, I once the first corporate partnering transaction I put together was 20 years ago, and a lot of money was involved, smart people, McKinsey, fantastic presentations, and TAM models, target account management models, and collaboration, and we will sell each other's services and products. And less than 1 year later, the alliance was terminated, and because it did not work. And it's like, but I spent 3 months day and night helping to put it together, and it's also, that's not nice. I mean, I mean, I was just like, okay, why did this not work? And that was lack of the right incentives internally. At like the counterpart of the company I was working for said, and it's amazing that they didn't do the check before. The McKinsey people, is that they talked to a salesperson who had to sell the products, and he says, "Look, you're sending me on the market, and I'm commission-based pay, and I have to sell these 20 products, and that's my commission on those products. Now you're adding 5 products to my portfolio, and I get a percentage on 20% of the sale price. Why should I do this?"
Mm-hmm.
And that's why it did not work. But what me was baffling, I was 20 years younger. I was like, but how come no one thought about this? Yeah. How on earth is this possible? I cannot tell you how much it costs to put that relationship together. 30 million wasted in equity funding, and then nothing. And so that was for me a very good lesson on on make sure that the metrics are and the incentives are right. So it has, I mean, also ultimately legal is, we always say it's a means to an end. I mean, legal is just something you use, like you use finance, and you structure a business relationship, and you have to put the right incentives and all that you put into a contract. But the basic human incentive mechanisms have to be there.
Yeah. So. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it goes back to what we were saying. They're all humans.
They're all humans. Yeah.
They all have egos.
Yeah.
You need to stroke a bit.
You need to feed. No, super. David and Alana, I have the feeling that we can keep on talking, right? I want to thank you definitely for all the information, everything you shared. If I summarize, and I'm sure that I forget some things, but just to make it easy, preparation is key, which I think is a life lesson, but whatever. Mm-hmm. Make sure you strive for the same objectives. Put it down in paper with contracts and term sheets. Make sure that it's clear for everybody. And as a startup, make sure you stay in the driver's seat. Did I forget one extra thing? You can each add one, unless my list was very concrete.
I think that was a very good list.
No, I think that that is the essence. Yeah.
Super. Thank you so much. So all of you, thank you as well for tuning in for the conversation. Keep an eye on our next episode where we have again 2 new guests talking about a very interesting topic on perspectives in the biotech startup life. Make sure you follow us on our LinkedIn. If you want to know more about this corporate startup relationship, you can read the book from David. We will make sure that it's somewhere in the comments. And if you have feedback or suggestions on next topics, other speakers, feel free to leave a message. Thanks again for joining. Until next time.